This is another in the Anarchism 101 series, which introduces you to great texts in anarchism and their writers. This is a very special one. Today's episode is my discussion of a chapter from Hind Swaraj by Mohandas Gandhi with K.P. Shankaran, and he makes the case that Gandhi, not Kropotkin, not Proudhon, not Bakunin, not Goldman, is the greatest, the most ethical, the most clear expression of anarchism. And he has convinced me. I didn't know Gandhi was an anarchist a year ago. Now I think the heart of anarchism is Gandhi's nonviolence. I think you will find this one eye-opening. Please enjoy after the music. Hello, welcome back to Everyday Anarchism. This is in the series Anarchism 101, where we are discussing important anarchist thinkers. And this is a very interesting and exciting one for me today because we are working with Mohandas Gandhi, in my opinion, one of the greatest anarchist thinkers of all time, not always thought of as an anarchist and not always well understood outside of India, or perhaps even inside of India. I will let my guest tell us that. So please, K.P. Shankaran, tell us who you are, and then we can get started with this discussion of Gandhi.
I was a teacher of philosophy, was teaching in one of the colleges in Delhi. And I got interested in Gandhi while I was teaching philosophy. I got interested in Gandhi. Now, I found Gandhi was actually a philosopher rather than an activist, political activist. He was a political activist, but he was too a philosopher. And I thought that he was one of the rare philosophers, belongs to a small group of philosophers like Buddha and Socrates. See, these philosophers were practicing ethics-led philosophical way of life rather than metaphysics-led philosophical way of life. And Gandhi belongs to that stream, and they're very rare group of philosophers.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point to begin with. For the people we've been looking at in this series, they are all activists and they are all philosophers, and they all try and interweave them, but it's very rare to find someone who actually achieves that. The person for me, so my PhD is in American culture, and for me it's Martin Luther King, who is remembered in America as an activist and is almost not read. People do not read his works. They study his activism, but not his philosophy. But he too was a philosopher, and of course was deeply, I'm jumping ahead now, but was deeply influenced by Gandhi.
Yeah, that's true. That in India also, that's very recently now, people are considering him as a philosopher. An American analytic philosopher from Colombia, Akhil Bilgrami, he wrote 10 or 15 years ago, he wrote an essay, Gandhi as a philosopher. That essay clicked. And now large number of people are willing to see him as a philosopher. And Gandhi, in fact, my reading was Gandhi, in fact, a philosopher. When you are considering Hind Swaraj has a substantial philosophical background. Yeah. I consider it's an anarchist manifesto, pacifist anarchist manifesto. It is actually Gandhi, according to me, he conceived Hind Swaraj from within ethical framework of non-violence, truthfulness, and concern for the well-being of all, and non-possession. These are 4 ethical principles within which he conceived this anarchist manifesto, Hind Swaraj.
Okay, wonderful. Before we get into the text, I want to spend most of my time with the philosophy, but when people think, Hind Swaraj is translated usually as Indian home rule. And when we think, at least about Gandhi in the West, we would think of the parliamentary state that exists in India as a state that he, is in some ways the founder of. Reading Hind Swaraj, it does not sound like that at all. So, but before we get into what he means by Indian home rule, I thought you could just briefly tell us, and I can jump in as well, what the rule system, what the system of rule was in India at the time, because it was run by the British, and it was precisely a British system, but it was a centralized system that Gandhi, I think, did not want to replace with a system that was a similar thing, just run by the Indians, if I'm correct.
Gandhi was very critical of British system. Gandhi was very critical of British system. And one possibility is that Gandhi, it was very difficult for many people to understand Gandhi. The reason for that, Gandhi was not using the Enlightenment vocabulary, the European Enlightenment vocabulary. He completely rejected European Enlightenment vocabulary. When you read Hind Swaraj, it is not written from the point of view of European Enlightenment. And his readers are, like us, are extremely Eurocentric. See, now from a Eurocentric point of view, Gandhi is very difficult to understand. And that's one of the reasons people like Nehru, even though he was his follower, he just couldn't understand him. So their understanding of the world is from the European point of view, and they accepted European state as the basic unit, and European British bureaucracy as essential, and which Gandhi actually rejected. But that rejection, Nehru and others did not take it seriously. So in the end of it, Gandhi's ideas are completely marginalized, and India became a Europeanized state and a bureaucracy which is also inherited from British. That's how India exists now.
Okay, if the listeners take nothing else away from this episode, I think we have done our jobs. If people understand that the India that exists today is precisely this European Enlightenment state, bureaucracy, railroad, massive centralized industry, and a parliament on top of all of it with federal sovereignty, that is not home rule in any way, in the sense that Gandhi meant. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's true. That from Gandhi's point of view, that is not home rule. Swaraj, according to Gandhi, Swaraj means, he says, actually, I'm quoting him, we don't want the tyranny of the British rule or Indian rule. So that is Gandhi's own statement. That is his anarchist, I consider that is anarchist declaration in Hind Swaraj. So Gandhi not only opposed British rule, he doesn't want to have anything like British rule. And also he considered European, the capitalist civilization as satanic. He called it satanic, and he advised Indians not to accept anything from the satanic civilization. He rejected it. And also that Gandhi considered parliamentary system is part of the representative parliamentary system. Democracy, parliamentary democracy is part of this satanic civilization. So he wanted to have a direct democracy instead of the parliamentary democracy system. So, but after independence, all that has been rejected, and they have taken up the British understanding of the world and introduced parliamentary system. Now India is in deep trouble because of that.
I think the parallels, again, to Martin Luther King are amazing, although it's not surprising because Gandhi was one of the primary people that King modeled himself on. But King called the American political system a burning building. He did not want simply integration of African Americans into it. He thought that the same way this form of capitalist political, quote, democracy was undemocratic and would lead people away from the spiritual truths of the lives they were living. Before we go further in Hind Swaraj, I thought you could briefly tell us about Gandhi's time in South Africa and how he came to write Hind Swaraj. So what led him up to this point?
Yeah, Gandhi started his career, and he went to England. You know that he went to England. He was in England for 3 years, and he studied law, and he became a barrister. And he came back to India. He couldn't become a successful lawyer. Fortunately for him, somebody from South Africa, a Muslim figure, invited him. He went to South Africa, and he lived in South Africa for 21 years. And these 21 years really altered Gandhi. Gandhi is really altered in South Africa, and he became an anarchist while he was in South Africa. Before he came to India at 1915. Before that, 1909, he wrote this text. And he wrote this text in Tolstoy farm. And he wrote that initially in Gujarati. And this is the only book he translated, he himself translated English and sent a copy of this to Tolstoy. And Tolstoy read that and approved it. And he had already read Tolstoy's Kingdom of the Heaven. I forget the title now.
The translation we have is The Kingdom of God is Within You.
Yeah, he had read that and actually thought very highly of it. And Gandhi was not technically a religious person. Normally people believe Gandhi was a religious person. That is because his vocabulary was religious vocabulary of the Vaishnava tradition. That is because he rejected European Enlightenment vocabulary. So he had to fall back to his parental vocabulary. So that vocabulary was a religious vocabulary, and Gandhi was constantly trying to metaphorize that vocabulary for political purposes. So he tended to use the words like Ram Raj. When you meet Hindus, he used this expression Ram Raj. That's a very, very Hindu expression. But when he met Muslims, he used the Muslim phrase, that is Khuda Raj. When he met Christians, he used the Christian phrase to express the ideal society he was looking for. So Gandhi was not religious in any traditional sense. And his vocabulary because religious, because he rejected the Enlightenment vocabulary. And for example, Tolstoy's anarchism is Christian anarchism. Tolstoy was a Christian anarchist. Tolstoy was not a political anarchist. Gandhi was a political anarchist. Gandhi was not a religious anarchist. So this is very important thing when we are talking about Gandhi's anarchism. It's a political anarchism. And from my point of view, if you look at Hind Swaraj, Gandhi was the most comprehensive and authentic anarchist. Not Bakunin, not Malakista, not Emma Goldman, not Kropotkin. They are all use violence. Anarchists are not supposed to use violence at all. They have a connection they accept this idea that there is a strong relation, intimate relation between means and end. And therefore, a genuine anarchist, political anarchist, it's impossible to use violence because they are looking for a non-hierarchical society. So non-hierarchical society, according to all of them, including Gandhi, can be produced only by using nonviolence as their praxis. So Gandhi's South African experiment, largely on using nonviolent praxis against a very brutal government, but still he hadn't conceived before Hind Swaraj conceived the idea of a non-violent society. That appears partially in Hind Swaraj.
This is unbelievable stuff. So I think you're absolutely right that for anarchism to truly become true to itself and to truly unite means and ends, it has to be nonviolent. I think you're also right that while Tolstoy recognizes this, he also refuses to take part in the kind of political engagement that is necessary. And I'm persuaded. I mean, it makes sense to me that Hind Swaraj is the first and best expression of anarchism that is the one that is still our legacy. That because of the integration of nonviolence and what he calls soul force, and I understand now he's using this religious vocabulary because that is a source of communication and a source of metaphor and a source of power. But unlike Tolstoy, I mean, Tolstoy never wrote anything like Hind Swaraj that laid out a vision for a society. And listeners, hopefully you've listened to the excerpt that I've read. I recommend you read the whole thing. Hind Swaraj is a truly powerful work, and it's more or less unknown in the Western English language tradition, as far as I know. I mean, I don't see anyone reading it or talking about it.
Yeah. Gandhi. That's what I said at the beginning. Gandhi conceived Hind Swaraj from within a ethical framework. See, very normally people think about Marx, for example, Marx's Communist Manifesto. Communist Manifesto is not taught from within an ethical framework, even though he uses ethical critique of capitalism. But it's not, whole thing is not conceived from within an ethical framework. Whereas Hind Swaraj is extremely critical of capitalism, but conceived from within an ethical framework. Everything there is charged with ethical ideas. And from the beginning itself, what is Swaraj? He says that it is not a British model state. It's a stateless society. And that is very clear. In Hind Swaraj is very clear. He didn't expand that, but he said that it is not the state, the society, the government Britain conceived, and we should not appropriate it. And then he goes on showing that everything related to capitalism is satanic. So why he was saying that, Gandhi had a distinction between necessary violence and unnecessary violence. He was not absolute non-violence was not part of Gandhi's philosophical system. It's like Buddha. Buddha was not absolutely non-violent. Gandhi thought was any society, there will be some necessary violence exist. And human being cannot exist without some kind of a necessary violence. But his objection to state was the paradigm of unnecessary violence. So his objection to state, because state was the paradigm of this kind of unnecessary violence, therefore state should be rejected. But you cannot reject state using violence. So that is where Gandhi is different from Bakunin, Malathis, all of them. So Gandhi, in that sense, is a different case altogether. Most consistent anarchist ever.
Yeah,
So
I
you
agree.
have, and also there are many other things in Hind Swaraj. One thing is a very, very sharp rejection of techno science. See, there is a reason for that. When you look for Gandhi's whole life, you realize that techno science and state are interrelated. You cannot have techno science without a powerful state. So if there is no powerful state, the techno science will it will disappear. And techno science is the most violent organ of a state. This is one particular reason why Gandhi accepted ethics as most fundamental, not metaphysics. Gandhi did not reject metaphysics, but metaphysics became secondary to Gandhi, and ethics became primary, like in Buddha and in the case of Socrates. For Socrates also, ethics became primary. But in Plato, metaphysics is primary, not ethics. And Buddha, metaphysics became less significant and ethics became primary. And this you can see from one sentence of Gandhi. That Gandhi in 1929 made a statement. He used to say that God is truth. That metaphor changed into truth is God. So Gandhi was in fact shifting from metaphysics to ethical foundation. So everything became founded in ethics. So part of Gandhi's project when he came to India from South Africa, not just chasing British away by non-violent movement, he wanted to conceive, he wanted to produce the background for a non-hierarchical societies, not one society, societies, and also wanted to get Hinduism grounded in ethics, not metaphysics. So this he got in 1907 from an American writer called Slater. He wrote a book called Ethical Religion. Gandhi translated that into Gujarati. And it's a free translation where he said, all religions should be founded on ethics. So metaphysics will become secondary. So the whole thesis of Gandhi is based on that. Where there is metaphysics, you accept metaphysics, you tend to accept state and also techno science. And you believe that techno science will give us an understanding of the truth, metaphysical truth. Gandhi rejected that. One of the important points that actually comes in Hind Swaraj.
I just wanted to make the point that Proudhon, Bakunin, and Kropotkin, they were certainly all interested in ethics, but they all started with metaphysics. Science becomes almost a religion with them, and they have this very tricky thing where they try and argue that like science is a religion, but it's in some ways a relativistic and unknowable religion. But nevertheless, behind their ethics lies this metaphysical conception, and Gandhi does not start with this metaphysical conception. I guess this was one of the questions I wrote. One of the easy Western misconceptions, I guess, and you've already addressed this to a certain extent, is that Gandhi has Hindu metaphysics, and that lies behind all of that. I think George Orwell criticizes him for being an Indian chauvinist or a Hindu chauvinist, which I agree is not true. But if you could just respond to that.
That possibility is because of his language. That I said that he constantly used religious language because he couldn't have any other language, because the language everybody was using in a colonial space was European Enlightenment language. That was the language of Jawaharlal Nehru. That was the language of all Gandhi's colleagues. But Gandhi's language was different. So Gandhi did not have an option to take any other language other than his parental vocabulary. That vocabulary was a religious vocabulary. So he used that and then trying to metaphorize it. And to some extent, he metaphorized some parts of it. But the other thing is that Gandhi was more influenced not by Hindus. And Gandhi was not a Hindu. He never went to a temple. He never worshipped. He did not have any idols around him. He never practiced anything which you call Hinduism. But he was not completely rejecting metaphysics. Metaphysics became secondary to him and ethics became primary. So he did not reject the idea of God. So that metaphysical idea he kept. He did not reject that like Bakunin. Bakunin rejected it. Gandhi did not reject that. Gandhi retained it, but it had only a secondary significance. The primary significance was ethics. So in any contact with Gandhi, as long as Gandhi can see that your position is ethical, Gandhi will accept you. You don't have to believe in God. But you should function from within ethical framework. So Gandhi wanted all his colleagues to function from within ethical framework, which he couldn't make. That is one of the reasons his colleague couldn't understand him. And others also, they find Hind Swaraj also difficult to understand because of this. They believe that also contains a load of religion. There is nothing there.
Okay, great. So I do want to ask you about the Gita, because I know Gandhi spoke of that many times, and it seems to me that that's one of the key sources of his ethical vocabulary. So could you tell us a bit about that connection?
See, Gandhi is very interesting. Gandhi was one of the extreme critique of Gita. Gandhi's relationship in Gita is very interesting. Before 1929, I think that 2 years before 1929, he gave a series of long lectures, nearly 1 year long discourses on Gita in his ashram. He picked up each sloga, verse, and analyzed it. And his interpretation then was more or less traditional interpretation. But within 2 years, his position changed. His position changed dramatically. He didn't reject the earlier one. What he did that, he produced a new translation for Gita. That's a literal translation of Gita. No long interpretations, but he produced some 10-page long introduction to Gita called Anarchist Yoga. That's the title of the introduction. That may be 10, 15 pages. That's one of the outstanding ethical theses you can ever think of. I myself consider that is as good as Aristotle's ethics. It's only 10, 15 pages. Within that 10, 15 pages, Gandhi criticized Gita thoroughly. And he said things like this. The main character of Gita, that is Krishna, he said, is not a divinity. He is a product of the writer's imagination. Normally, people who are reading Gita, that introduction won't see that. And he said that the belief in God is not going to make you a good person unless you practice truthfulness and non-violence. There is no point in you muttering, chanting slogas. That is not going to help you. And he said, Krishna, the main character, is not a divinity. He's a product of an author's imagination. Then he criticizes the author using war imagery. War imagery, he said that is wrong in Gita's context. Then he adopted, reinterpreted an idea in Gita that is called Nishkama Karma or Anasakti. That is, you act without any desires of the fruits of action. The result of action you should not desire, but you act. But then that act should not be a violent act, because Gandhi is conceiving the all acts from within ethics. So Gandhi's point of view, Gita's use of war was unethical. So that is the whole, and that's an ethical critique of Gita, while he is accepting the idea of action without looking for any fruits of action. So Gandhi was not a blind follower or blind believer of user of Gita. He is one of the outstanding internal criticism of Hinduism from within. He gave a fantastic internal criticism from within Hinduism and criticized Gita. So we should not connect Gandhi with Gita in an ordinary sense of the connection. People, he is a believer in Gita, believer in God. He accepted Gita blindly. No, Gandhi did not do that.
You are overturning most of what I understood about Gandhi, and I must say it's thrilling. And you're making sense of Gandhi in a way that I feel like does not make sense without these understandings. How this anarchist could be the father of India as a Hindu nation state. It doesn't make sense, and we're learning that.
And he never thought that he would become father of Indian state. Somebody called him father of Indian state after his death.
Yeah, amazing.
He did not. When Indian flag was hoisted, Indian government was willing to send a plane to Calcutta and get him to Delhi. He did not go to Delhi. He did not salute the Indian flag. Gandhi is the father of nation, did not salute Indian flag. And in constructive program, he has a small booklet called constructive program. That's an anarchist program. In the constructive program, he says that Indian flag, Indian national anthem, you should not impose on anybody.
It seems to me that the Indian nation state, which I understand, it doesn't surprise me the rise of Hindu nationalism in India over the past years, because that seems to me that's what nation states do. When you create a government and define only a certain kind of person as deserving of sovereignty, you're going to get that form of nationalism. Yep. So it sounds like Gandhi wouldn't have been surprised by this. It also sounds like India as it exists is more or less precisely the opposite of Gandhi's vision. Is that right?
That's true. Now the Indian state, Gandhi said that there should not be a state. So there should be a small anarchist enclaves. That's what you call villages. Those are self-sufficient anarchist communes. These anarchist communes, he never said that state should be removed. He did not say that. He said that you can have small anarchist communities within Indian state. And once its communities slowly become matured, the Indian state will finally wither away. So you should not directly attack Indian state. Instead of that, you generate these communities. And Gandhi's constructive program was to generate these small communities, self-sufficient communities, self-ruling communities, without a central government and without a central institution. And Gandhi's conceived communes, they never had police or some power which is guarding it, all that you can use is satyagraha against. If there is a violation, you can use satyagraha against that violator. So that is how Gandhi conceived India. It's a complex of small communes, self-sufficient communes. They look after themselves, and their functions within the framework of ethics. See, this is what normally miss, that the ethics of framework, the framework of ethics within which communities function. If you don't have ethics of that framework of ethics, what you have is a material self-interest framework within which state functions. State functions within materialist self-interest, and individuals also function within material self-interest. So that is why we have capitalism. Capitalism is the model of materialist self-interest. Gandhi just opposite of that. So Gandhi's main criticism of capitalism is not a historical critique in the sense Marxist. It was purely moral critique. That moral critique says that it functions outside ethics and therefore it is satanic, and advising Indians in Hind Swaraj not to accept the satanic civilization, which is capitalism.
Excellent. And then in this reading, Marxist communism and even some of the anarchist communists, while they are interested in ethics, they often start with the material world and especially material goods. And they're sort of the first claim in someone like Kropotkin is actually we can meet your material needs. There are enough bread. And this is accepting the sort of that the terrain to be fought over is the terrain of the material world as opposed to the ethical world. And then Kropotkin's ethics come after the material world. And you're telling me for Gandhi, that's not the case.
And you're not okay. For Gandhi, it's very interesting about Gandhi's constructive program, which I consider is an anarchist program. Gandhi also thought was an anarchist program. That the program is to generate freedoms. Development means freedoms. Development of freedoms rather than economic development. If you have freedom to have reasonably good water, you have freedom to eat enough food. Enough food, not much, enough food. And freedom to breathe good air. Freedom to cure curable diseases. And freedom from patriarchy. Gandhi has a section on women. Women should be treated, men and women should be treated each other as colleagues. And they are same. There can't be any difference at all. So Gandhi's anarchism contains within that, because of the moral space, the men and women, there is no hierarchy at all. There is no hierarchy at all. But the way of generating it, how to generate it, is an issue after Gandhi's death. While he was fighting against British in India, he was building a very substantial number of satyagrahis. That is the non-violent resistors. Those non-violent group are supposed to try to create this model anarchist villages. And he thought that when India become state, these villages could be the force which can stop the power of that state. And after Gandhi's death, actually Vinoba, a follower of Gandhi, he took up this issue, and there was land land, trying to get this called Bhutan movement. Bhutan movement. Bhutan movement is a non-violent revolution. Now, Ostergaard is the theoretician and historian of this movement. This movement actually started after Gandhi's death, 1961, I think, 10 years. He tried to, Vinoba and his group tried to walk around and requested people to donate land. And people donated land. Many people donated land. And the land, the quantity they received, 1.9 million hectares of land. You have to understand that 1960s India is desperately poor. And rich is a small group, but these guys managed to get 1.9 million hectares and they gave that to government to distribute. Government distributed half of it. The other half, no one knows anything about it. So that movement failed. That movement failed after 10 years. See, quite a large amount of land they managed to get. And a similar kind of movement happened in Sri Lanka too. Sri Lanka, the Gandhian movement, which started by a school teacher, and they managed to get 15,000 villages. And they tried to empower those villages and make it self-sufficient. That movement also happened after Gandhi's death. Then there is in India, there is a trade union, which is called Self-Employed Women's Association. Self-Employed Women's Association is a trade union movement, which is based on Gandhian principles. And that they don't have in a particular place. Before this COVID and the war in Yemen, there's a war in Yemen between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. And before that, this organization had a branch in Yemen. And they also had many branches in African countries. Also had a branch in Turkey. And these functioned as Gandhi's anarchist villages. They are no particular place. And they are only women and they are self-sufficient. They look after themselves. They earn the money and they bypass the state. See, bypassing the state and looking after themselves is one of the technique Gandhi given to these people. You don't have to depend upon state. State is a violent organ. So you can exist within the state without a place. You can float around and you can function there in a hierarchless way. So all these things happen. And most of these dissident movements all over the world are affected by Gandhi's non-violent appeal. So actually these, what's his name? Balibar. Atin Balibar wrote reading Marx with Althusser. Althusser and Balibar. Balibar said that. Balibar wrote a fantastic essay some 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's called Lenin and Gandhi. And Lenin and Gandhi, he said that Lenin's time is over. Balibar is a Marxist, French Marxist, but French Marxist Party threw him out because he criticized French Marxist Party. And Balibar said that Lenin's time is over and Gandhi's time is up. And we have to experiment with Gandhi's method. And he said most of the contemporary dissident movements are all affected by Gandhi's methods. And also there is a touch of anarchism in all these groupings. There is no hierarchy. There is no particular leader. It's that kind of a Gandhian movement. So that is the significance of Gandhi as an anarchist. But he has a lot of other things, like he was a critic of Hinduism. He was also a political worker against government colonialism. And also, he was the man who really understood the nature of colonialism. See, now he called that satanic. See, that phrase, satanic civilization, is significant in the sense that it's literally satanic, in the sense that Europe became rich only because of colonization. No country now can become as rich as Europe and America. China, you look at China. China has exploited Chinese workers to the hilt, but it became big enough. But it didn't become an upper.
Yeah, China's nowhere near achieving the higher income per capita GDP.
Upper income. Yes. But the middle income, in the middle income, they are upper position. But it couldn't cross. It couldn't cross. It is not. It's almost impossible to cross. Only South Korea did that. Japan did it. Japan did it with American help and things like the Korean War, American help, and South Korea, small state, and also because of dictatorship, huge dictatorship, 10 years within which they achieved, but a small state. But Europe and America achieved this economic flowering because of colonization. Without colonies, you cannot become rich. That is why Gandhi called that is a satanic civilization. You are enjoying the fruits of the sins you committed. Right?
Yeah, I think this insight is probably more important in this moment than it ever has been before, especially when you look at. I appreciate greatly that you brought up this idea of the higher income countries. So this UN idea of, quote, developed nations, which means high income, and then the idea in the UN, in this community, is that India and China and Kenya and Argentina and all of these countries shall reach this promised land of high income. And you're absolutely right. All of those high income countries reached it through colonialism.
They cannot only see now what are the criminality of these European countries, particularly look at Britain. Now we have enough information about what happened to Kenya. Kenya, they massacred nearly 90,000 people. There were gulags in Kenya, the British gulags in Kenya. And they exploited the people, and the resources are taken away. And India too. There's an interesting fact about India. When the Mughal state collapsed in the beginning of 1700, it became small states all around. And that's a time the East India Company took over parts of it. And before East India Company taking over in 1757, India's industrial output was 25% of the global output, which is substantial. In beginning of 20th century, it became 2%. 2% during the 20th century. So what was happening, the British Raj was simply exploiting the workforce and also siphoning out its resources and its wealth, and the country is become pulverizing it, literally pulverized it. And they use the Enlightenment vocabulary for the justification of that injustice.
Yes, and speaking of Lenin, the Soviet Union increased its mechanical industrial development, but it's the same thing. It was this Enlightenment vocabulary of progress, of growth, of development, and the result was misery, poverty, injustice. And the idea that Gandhi's critique of this is not just valid, but more valid than ever before, I think is absolutely right. And it's clearly part of the work we need to do is to recover his constructive program from whatever it has been shrouded in, whether that is Hindu nationalism or simply a lack of awareness of him as a political and ethical thinker.
Yes, that's true. That's true. There is an interesting chapter in Hinsaraj where he was talking about Hindus and Muslims. There he has a one-line definition of nationalism. He says that nationalism, we are one nation because we are all from the early group of same great-grandfathers, mothers. We are from the same stock of human beings. We are all descended. So we are one nation because of our ancestral connection. So he generated an idea of ancestral nationalism. Our ancestors were same. Therefore, we are one nation. Not because of your territory, not because of your language, not because of your religion, because our ancestors were same people. Therefore, we are one nation. And also, he has an idea of patriotism, where he was talking about Italy and India. He says patriotism is actually working for, a patriot is one who works for the local community and get the approval of the local community. Anyone who is working for the local community is a patriot. So all these are part of that small book. Right? And also his idea of education, which is also very important, I thought. He said that there is no point in learning reading and writing unless the child is already ethically oriented. So ethical orientation presupposes learning. Without ethical orientation, learning would become satanic, which is I completely agree with that. I completely agree with the idea that only with an ethical framework we can lead a civilized life. And if you remove the ethics and our self-interest and material interest take over, then we become, according to Gandhi, satanic. That's what we see now in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you see in Ukraine. Look at the way democracy degenerated in India. India is degenerated horribly. India has become now a Hindu state. India is multicultural. India is literally multicultural. But now India has become a Hindu state because of parliamentary democracy. Because after 70 years, the Hindu majority become powerful enough to get elected every 5 years and now ruling it. So it is a majoritarian democracy, and therefore the whole idea of democracy is failed in India. And the same thing happened in Pakistan, same thing happened in Sri Lanka, what is happening in Sri Lanka now. The failure of this democracy, parliamentary democracy. Now, the problem is that if not parliamentary democracy, if there is a state, if there is no parliamentary democracy, then you can only have dictatorship. So Gandhi's point is that is the problem. State is the problem. If you remove state, then there is no question of dictatorship or parliamentary democracy. Now you have direct democracies in small enclaves. What you have direct democracies. So state is the culprit. State is the culprit, and state is what supporting techno-science, and techno-science is using its power to generate most obnoxious weaponry, and it is because there is no ethics guiding it, it's just destroying us.
In the name of progress, even.
Yeah, in the name of progress, in the name of truth. In the name of truth, we are trying to discover how reality is. That is what Gandhi was objecting. There is no final reality for Gandhi. There is no final reality. There is no point in looking for a final reality. All what is required, lead a life within an ethical framework. Then you will be empowering people. We are also generating freedoms. What we require is freedoms, not economic progress. Economic progress are subsidiary. In order to back freedoms, you perhaps need economic development, certain extent. And science also, certain extent we require. Not to replace human labor. There is no point in replacing human labor and robots taking over. And all that happens only when you lead a life outside ethical framework. That is the Gandhi's critique of modernity and science, technology, and state.
So I had planned to discuss some of his activism, but I don't think we need to. First of all, I don't intend for this to be my last episode about Gandhi. I will certainly cover him more, but otherwise I would say, since the goal of this was to teach listeners to share Gandhi's anarchist vision and legacy with the listeners, I would say you have gone far beyond anything I imagined. This has been wonderful. All that's left for me to ask is if there's anything else you would like to add, because I feel enlightened. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, there you have it. You can go to everydayanarchism.com to find more about the show and the series Anarchism 101. I hope, like me, your understanding of both Gandhi and anarchism have been profoundly changed. Or even better, if you already knew this stuff, in which case you are way ahead of me. Remember, you can also go to everydayanarchism.com to support the show financially, and you can always support the show just by telling a friend or getting the word out another way, like sharing it on social media, or leaving a ratings on Apple or Spotify podcasts. All that's left to say is that the music, which you're about to hear, is by David Hill.